Have you ever found yourself stuck in a conversation that feels like you're walking through quicksand? You're trying to explain something so simple, so obvious, and yet somehow the goalpost keeps moving. The person you're talking to twists your words, tells you that you never said that, or suddenly brings up something from 3 years ago that has completely nothing to do with what you were discussing. If you've nodded along to that description, you're not unreasonable and you're definitely not alone. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Courage to Overcome, the Christian podcast for women who are in toxic, narcissistic relationships, how to manage and navigate them. So, if you're tuning in today because you're exhausted from trying to have rational conversations with someone who refuses to be rational, then this episode is for you. Today, we're tackling one of the most frustrating and frankly exhausting situations you might find yourself in: arguing with a narcissist. And more importantly, I'm going to share with you what actually works instead. Because there's something that might set you free today. So stop trying to win the argument. The goal was never for you to win, it was for you to be silenced. So let's dive in. So before we talk about what to do instead of arguing, we need to understand what's actually happening when you're arguing with a narcissist. Because if you don't understand the game, you can't change your strategy. When you argue with someone who has narcissistic tendencies, you're not actually in a debate. You're not trying to reach mutual understanding or find compromise. What's happening is much more strategic, whether they realize it or not. Think of it like this: a narcissist needs to win. Not just win, they need you to be wrong, to be diminished, to be confused. Why? Because their entire sense of self-worth depends on being superior. When you challenge them, even gently, you're threatening that fragile ego, and they will pull out every tool in their toolbox to restore their false sense of superiority. What does that toolbox look like? Well, it looks like gaslighting, where they make you question your reality; deflection, where they turn your concern into an attack on you; minimizing, where they act like your hurt doesn't matter; projection, where they accuse you of exactly what they're doing; lying, not even blinking when caught in a contradiction; and love bombing, suddenly being sweet when they sense you're pulling away. Anything to keep you confused and off balance. Now here's what breaks most Christian women in these situations. We enter arguments with a spirit of reconciliation and truth. We believe that if we just explain ourselves clearly enough, if we're just patient enough, kind enough, or faithful enough, the other person will hear us and change. We pray, we cry, and we try again. But you cannot logic someone into feeling differently when their feelings are tied to their need of control. And that's what I want you to understand before we move forward. This isn't about your communication style. This isn't a reflection of your worth. This is a fundamental difference in how you and this person operate in conflict. Why arguing with a narcissist doesn't work? Let me ask you something. Have you ever won an argument with this person? I mean, truly won it, where they said, you know what, you're right, I was wrong, I'm going to change. For most of you listening, the answer is probably no. And that's not because you're not persuasive enough or smart enough or faithful enough. It's because the narcissist's goal was never to reach understanding. The goal was to dominate the conversation and to make you doubt yourself, to come out on top. Here's what happens every single time you argue. First, you present your concern clearly. Second, they deny it, minimize it, or twist it. Third, you try to clarify or provide examples. They counterattack or bring up your past failures. Fifth, you get defensive because, hello, you're human, and now you're the angry one. Six, they point out how angry and unreasonable you are, and suddenly the entire conversation is about your tone, not their behavior. Seventh, you're exhausted, you're questioning yourself, and they walk away feeling like they've won. And you're drained. You feel unheard, you feel invisible, and worst of all, many of you are feeling guilty, like maybe you were too harsh or maybe you did misunderstand. This is the trap. This is the cycle. And every time you re enter that argument, you lose a little more of yourself, a little more of your confidence, a little more of your peace. As Christians, we're taught to keep trying, to have faith, to believe in redemption. But, beloved, redemption requires the other person to recognize their need for change. And a true narcissist doesn't believe there's anything wrong with them. You're the problem. You're always the problem. So when you keep arguing, you're not investing in the relationship. You're investing in your own confusion. So if arguing doesn't work, what do we do? Because you can't just stay silent. You can't just accept behavior that violates your boundaries and your sense of self. And you're right, you can't stay silent. But there's a difference between asserting yourself and trying to win an argument. Here are the strategies that actually protect your peace and your integrity. Strategy 1. The grey rock method. When the narcissist tries to provoke you or pull you into an argument, you become as boring and unresponsive as a grey rock. You don't engage emotionally. You keep your answers short, factual, and emotionless. Instead of you never listen to me, you always make everything about yourself. I don't see it that way. The narcissist feeds on emotional reactions. They want you upset, defensive, or engaged. When you refuse to provide that energy, the argument loses its fuel. Stage 2. State your boundary once, then stop. This is where you use your words, but you use them wisely and sparingly. For example, I'm not comfortable with how this conversation is going. I'm going to step away. Then you actually step away. You don't explain further. You don't defend your position. You don't answer follow-up questions designed to drag you back in. One statement, then silence. Strategy 3. Refuse to participate in circular conversations. Narcissists love circular conversations because they can keep rearranging the pieces until you're too confused to stand firm. When you notice the conversation is going in circles, say, I've already addressed this. I'm not going to repeat myself. Then you stop responding to that particular topic. Strategy 4. Document, don't debate. If there's any chance this relationship might end, or if you're in a situation where facts matter legally, like for example co-parenting, financial issues, etc., stop trying to convince them of the truth and start documenting the truth. Write down what happened, keep the receipts, save the messages, build your case quietly, not through argument. Strategy 5. Find the truth outside the relationship. This is the one thing that will change your life. Stop looking to this person to validate your reality. You know what you heard. You know what happened. You know what you feel. The truth doesn't need their agreement to be true. Like I've said before in previous episodes, talk to a trusted friend, a therapist, a pastor, or a mentor. Build a support system of people who see you clearly and believe you. Your reality doesn't come from their acknowledgement. It comes from God's truth about you. Strategy 6. Practice the power of the pause. Before you respond to a provocation or accusation, pause. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself, do I need to respond to this? Will responding serve my peace or feed the conflict? Often silence is the most powerful response. Now, I want to speak to you as a Christian for a moment. There's a scripture that comes to mind, and I think it's going to liberate some of you today. It's in Proverbs 26:4-5, and it says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes." Now that seems contradictory. Right? And I think that's intentional, because sometimes wisdom means knowing when not to engage. Jesus had critics too. There were people who misunderstood him, twisted his words, and tried to trap him in arguments. And do you know what he often did? He answered them with wisdom. He didn't argue. He didn't try to convince them. He simply moved on and continued his mission. I'm not saying you should abandon your marriage or your relationship without prayer and discernment. That's really, really important. Prayer and discernment and a word from the Lord. What I am saying is this: your worth is not tied to the other person's understanding of you. God sees you, God knows the truth, and God's opinion of you is infinitely more important than the opinion of someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. When you stop fighting to be heard by someone who is determined not to listen, you can free up so much spiritual and emotional energy. Energy you can invest in your healing, your growth, and your relationship with Christ. Proverbs 27:12 says, the prudent sees danger and takes refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is to stop fighting a battle that isn't yours to win. So what do you do with all of this starting today? Well, firstly, if you're in a relationship right now that feels like this, give yourself permission to stop trying so hard. You're not failing. You're not lacking faith. You're not hitting a wall that no amount of effort on your part can move. Second, choose one of these strategies to implement this week. Just one. The grey rock method, setting a boundary or pausing before you respond. Pick one and practice it with intention. Third, build your support system. Find people who see you, believe you, and remind you of the truth when you're tempted to doubt yourself. Join a women's group, find a Christian counselor, and reach out to trusted friends. Fourth, pray. But pray differently. Don't just pray for the other person to change. Pray for clarity, for wisdom, for your own healing and protection. Pray for discernment about what this relationship means and what God is calling you to do. And finally, be gentle with yourself. If you slip and find yourself arguing again, don't shame yourself. This is a pattern you've likely been in for a long time. Breaking it takes practice and grace, the grace you desperately need to give yourself. So I know some of you are in situations right now where you're basically questioning everything. You're wondering, if you should leave. You're wondering if you should stay. You're wondering if you're being too harsh or not firm enough. You're living in this constant state of confusion and doubt. I want you to hear this. The confusion you feel is not a sign of your weakness. It's a sign that you've been in a system designed to keep you confused. And here's also what I want you to know. You have the power to change your part in this dance. You can't change the other person, but you can change how you respond. You can protect your peace and you can reclaim your reality. And when you do, you begin to see things more clearly. You'll have more strength and you'll be better equipped to make whatever decision God is calling you to make about this relationship. And just remember that your worth is not determined by whether this person understands you, appreciates you, or even loves you in the way you deserve. Your worth comes from God, and God sees you. God knows your heart, and God is with you in this. and you have the courage to overcome, and I'm really rooting for you. Thank you so much for joining me on Courage to Overcome. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to explore, please reach out. Until next time, stay strong, stay faithful, and keep choosing your peace. And before I go, I want to include an important disclaimer. This podcast is created for educational and supportive purposes for Christian women navigating difficult relationships. The content shared is not a substitute for professional mental health treatment, legal advice, or medical care. If you are in an abusive relationship, emotionally, physically, or otherwise, please reach out to a professional counselor. Thank you for watching. Take care and God bless.